Sean Bobbitt, you're the cinematographer for Judas and the Black Messiah, about the FBI effort to infiltrate the Black Panthers and ultimately assassinate its chairman, Fred Hampton. Did you already have ideas for how you wanted to shoot the film from first reading the script?
When I first read a script, I always try to avoid creating too many of my own thoughts and images, because it's really my job as a cinematographer, I always feel, is to interpret the ideas of the director. And so I try not to bias myself right off the bat, and really just very carefully listen to what the director has to say. And then from there, start to create the images and the ideas of the visual look of the film.
And the director of the film is Shaka King. How did you come together with him to work on the film and decide on that look?
Well, it was very fortunate. I just happened to be working in New York at the time. Shaka had contacted my agent, and I'd seen the script, and we were able to meet up very briefly. And he's, immediately his passion about the project, his knowledge of the project, the research he'd done on the project, and he had like 200 stills photographs that he wanted to show me. I right off the bat, I thought, okay, yeah, this is, having read the script, it's a very important, powerful, sad, distressing story. But a very timely one as well. But that, coupled with his ideas and his passion, it was an easy decision to make.
And this being a true story about someone who was a public figure, there's a lot of footage of Fred Hampton. Did you do a lot of your own research to into his life and into footage of him that informed your approach to the film?
Absolutely. Whenever I start a film, I try to immerse myself, particularly if it's a true story and there are facts there to be garnered. So, and it's also, although I'm an American, I in the 60s, late 60s, I was living in Saudi Arabia and England. So it's a part of American history that I actually really know very little about. And as I was educating myself about it, it was very humbling. And I felt that, I should know this, everyone should know this. And that kind of spurred me on to do more research and more understanding. And the photographs that Shaka had were such a powerful visual touchstone that they sort of informed everything in terms of the overall approach to the look of the film. And, which was really Shaka's idea, to create that world of 1968, not in a documentary form, but in maybe a slightly stylized form. And to use that sort of ectochrome, Kodachrome feel and the vibrancy of the colors of those images, as a way of sort of emphasizing the youth and passion and momentum of all these characters. And so, as we spoke, and of course working with the designer, Sam Lashinto, who had a really strong feel and concept as well of color and the look and feel, the look of the film fell into place very quickly.
And you yourself have a background in news and documentary. You mentioned that Shaka King didn't want necessarily the documentary look; you want something more stylized. But did having that news and documentary a background also kind of come into play for you as you're directing this true or photographing this true story of Fred Hampton?
Well, because of where I come from, it informs pretty much everything I do. And I think that's why stories like this interest me. I'm fascinated by history, I'm fascinated by humans and what humans do. And so, it just clicked with me. I can't say that there were any specific documentary techniques that were used in the film, but there would only be, say, in the uh, when they're on the steps of the police station, and it's a very sort of impromptu demonstration, and we shot that, more like a news camera. But the rest of it was much more stylized. I think it had more to do with trying to capture reality, a believable world that we could sustain for the whole duration of the film, so that the audience is absolutely lost in that world and believes the world, and therefore believes the characters in it, and are drawn along in that belief.
And in the film, we see not just Fred Hampton, the political figure and the public figure, but also the personal life of Fred Hampton, and especially his life with Deborah, who he fell in love with. Like, what was it like shooting those more intimate scenes where we get to know him in that much more personal way?
Well, for Shock, it was crucial that this film feel intimate, that we really are with Fred Hampton, and we're really with O'Neill, and the different forces dragging them through the story are something that we're sympathetic to, and again that we're absolutely engaged with. So it was a very important part of the storytelling to be able to access that intimacy. And so it works a lot more in a lot more close-ups and a lot more isolation of the characters in the frames themselves in those intimate moments. Because if it's a very tricky film, because you have two main characters effectively, and you need to be sympathetic to both of them, even though what one of them is doing is truly evil. But you can't let one overpower the other, and I think that is the genius of what Shaka has done, is that he has given them sort of equal intimacy, equal time, equal power to understand who they are and what they are. And in O'Neill's place, it's hard to know why he's doing what he's doing, and I don't think he quite understood it all himself. So that intimacy is crucial to the understanding of the story and the telling of it.
And you mentioned that this other side of the film, that where William O'Neill is what he's undertaking is this kind of evil plot by the FBI, and it does feel like this other world, this FBI world that we see in the film, especially that shot early on, the scene of J. Edgar Hoover talking to agents about the Black Messiah. That's a very ominous, like unsettling scene. How was the approach to that scene different? Because obviously that is not a scene where we're thinking very much about sympathy for those characters.
Yeah. Well, there's an interesting mix of color palettes throughout the whole of the film. And a lot of the FBI tends more towards the drabber browns and oranges, or very cold blue. Whereas when we're with the Panthers, you have a much more vibrant color palette with a lot of greens and yellows in it. And so it was trying to subtly differentiate those two worlds, but not in a way that would make them so disconnected that we didn't believe that they were existing at the same time.
And there are a lot of tense night scenes in the film. From William O'Neill's first, like trying to steal the car that sets up his storyline, to Jake Winters' confrontation with the police later on. How do you approach like night scenes in terms of giving them that sense of intensity and and visual clarity?
Well, a lot of the time it's deciding what to show and what not to show. And the real difference between a night scene and a day scene is that it's a lot easier to hide a lot of things. So, it really is trying to give enough information for the audience to follow what the action is, but not giving too much information to distract from the action. So I love night scenes because you can very clearly and simply draw the attention of the audience from what character to character simply by the amount of light and where you put the light. So it's always, a conscious balance. But again, and the colors there, we were hoping for a sort of a golden street light, so that the nighttime again is vibrant. It has a color to it. It has a color saturation, but within that, mixing lots of other colors as well. So there's visual interest through that color contrast in the depth of the frame, but in a subtle way. So again, it's not distracting from the action, but it's building that world and keeping that world going.
And one of more complex scenes, I would imagine, would be the shootout between the Black Panthers and the FBI. There's a lot of action in that scene, a lot of moving parts. What was that scene like to shoot?
Oh, you're talking about the final scene?
No, the earlier scene before the cops,
Yeah.
the police, not the FBI in that scene.
We spent a lot of time choreographing that and planning that scene because we didn't have a lot of time to shoot it. So that was one of the few scenes that we actually storyboarded and sort of worked very closely to the storyboards. So by the time we got into the scene, everyone knew what was going on. And so we were able to very quickly and very efficiently shoot the whole conflict. And the interesting thing is that when it's cut down, and what Shock has done to all the action scenes is he compressed them dramatically, which has made them that much sharper and that much shocking, and really has brought them alive in a way. If we just kept carrying on shooting and shooting and shooting, people have seen that all before. It's really difficult to make a shootout interesting, but by keeping it sharp and keeping it very much, there are very few tricks to it at all. It is very simple, and that was another concept of the whole film, was the visual simplicity of the storytelling. It doesn't have to be clever; it just needs to be informative, and that works really well, I think, in the shootout sequence.
And then, as you mentioned, the scene at the end of the film where Fred Hampton is assassinated by the FBI, and that is a much different kind of sequence because it's dark and it's so pierced by the sort of the gunshots in that scene, like this intense kind of like. How did you capture that?
Well, that was technically the most challenging scene of the whole film. And it's also really the only set that we worked on, because there's that overhead shot, which is actually on a motion control arm that goes from room to room to room. And to get something like that, it's an expensive thing to do, so it has to work. So an awful lot of time and effort went into the design of that whole sequence again, because this wasn't a big budget film. We didn't have all the time in the world to shoot it. We had a very limited amount of time, and this is the culmination of the story of the film and the culmination of Fred Hampton's life. So it needed to have a power to it, and a horror to it as well. And so everyone, all the heads of department, everyone worked very hard to ensure that when we went into that we knew what we were doing and where we were going. and that it was going to work.
And you know, before this film, you've worked a lot with Steve McQueen, including on his film Widows, which also features Daniel Kaluuya, but in of course a very, very different kind of role, much less sympathetic to say the least. Like, what was it like shooting him in this versus that?
Well, I have such immense respect for Daniel. He is a truly great actor, and his commitment to this role was phenomenal. You know, the fact that he put on weight, he absolutely learnt how Fred Hampton spoke, how he used his words, the idiom, the cadence. He embodied Fred Hampton, and you know, it was a real pleasure. I'm very lucky. I operate the camera, so I'm right there. And one of the greatest things is to be that close to performance, and to feel it sort of going through my eyes and into my brain, and just savoring the sheer power and the passion and the technical ability. And you know, Daniel has all those things, but at the same time, so did everyone else in the cast. You know, they are all great performances, and they were all such a pleasure to work with.
Well, I want to congratulate you on the film, and thank you so much for talking with me today. It's been a pleasure.
Well, no, thank you very much, and you know, hopefully we'll speak again one
Yes,
day.
definitely.
Okay, thank you very much, Daniel.